what your child is being taught in school today? Since the introduction of No Child Left Behind, which led to Common Core, and now it's the 1619 Project, the dumbing down of American students has progressed into curriculum that indoctrinates our kids with the belief that all light-skinned people are racist and confuses the sex orientation of our children. In this week's Facebook Live, I'm going to be covering what our children are being taught in public schools. Do you actually know what your kids are learning in the classroom or in the virtual learning room? Today I'm going to be presenting some of these very important issues, and I'm going to be giving a lot of information on the history of how our federal government has taken over the public school system in terms of curriculum and what is being taught to our students in schools. So last week I talked about the exodus of families from government schools that continues to accelerate nationwide, sparking panic among the educational establishment that has miserably failed America's children. But what they aren't telling you is that the trends are not just because of COVID, contrary to government claims. Yes, it's extremely true that parents are fed up with virtual schooling and public education's misuse of funds, but parents are also outraged about the educational indoctrination of our children. So those families aren't just going to go running back to enroll when the pandemic ends and schools open again, because a lot of parents know about the indoctrination of our kids in terms of sex education, the changing of our American history, and the takeover of the federal government of curriculum that started way back with the Bush Senior administration. And I'm going to be going over that today. So this year, Common Core has morphed into the rewriting of our history books, as well as the continued agenda to push sex education upon children as young as grade school. The 1619 Project only rolled out last year, so the majority of parents are not even aware that the 1619 curriculum is most likely already being taught in your child's school today. Parents, it's already here, and it started last August in the 2020-2021 school year. The radical left has pushed their identity, gender, politics on kids as young as grade school. So how did we get here, parents? How did we get here? So it's not really a partisan issue, because both parties were on board to roll out the socialist teaching strategies and enforce Common Core's national standardized test scores, weakening the state control over education. And it started way back in 1991 with Bush Senior, and it was called the Goals 2000 Initiative. So it started way back then when they started, federal government started slowly taking control and having a say-so over the curriculum being taught in public schools. Then it morphed into No Child Left Behind with Clinton in 2002. So No Child Left Behind was enacted, and it was fully on board and being taught in schools across the nation. And then Obama brought in Common Core in 2010, which then only increased the standardized testing, the government say-so over what's being taught in school, the enforcement of standardized test scores on all students, and this Pavlovian theory of how they teach kids, which is a psychological behavioral theory, and I'm going to go into that a little later. So then, now in the 1619 Project, I skipped sex education. Sex education started in 2016 with Obama, and that's when the gender identity started being talked about, started being implemented in sex education in schools. And then In 2020, beginning of this 2020-2021 school year with the 1619 project, at which I'm going to go in depth in today so that you are aware of what your children are learning in their history class. Okay, so parents, please be sure and leave your comments below because I'd love to hear from you on if you know about this, are you aware of this? Let me take a drink of water here. Or if you have any further questions on clarifying the 1619 project or any of this information that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And please be sure and like and share this video because it helps the algorithms to share with other parents who need this information. Because parents, we have to wake up to what's going on in school today. We have to know what our children are being taught in school. We have to understand what's happening. And many parents are not aware and are completely don't have this information about how their child is being taught and basically brainwashed through curriculum in schools today. And at the end of this live, I'm going to be giving you information on how you can get more coaching from me if you'd like to learn more information or get help on your child's IEP. So as an advocate of more than 23 years, and I've attended more than 3,000 IEP meetings, I lost count a long time ago, but I've seen No Child Left Behind rolled out in 2000, which then morphed into Common Core, a method of teaching that taught our kids what to think instead of how to think. Because the old school way of teaching, when I went to school, used to be teaching, our education was to teach kids how to think. So you're taught curriculum, and then we're learned how to problem solve. We're learned how to deduce information that we learned into conclusions and make our own mind up on what we believe or what did we learn or what do we think about what we learned. Today it's this is the information, this is how you think, and these are the standardized test scores, and you better write what we told you to think. Otherwise, you're going to not get it right. That's the way kids are being taught today. 10 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to have grade school curriculum include lessons about a child's right to have the option to change their sexual orientation or question their gender identity, all without parent permission. Only 4 years ago, we would have been appalled to think that schools would teach our kids that people with light skin would be demonized as racists, no matter where they were born or the history of their family. So let's dig into the history of how this all got to where we are today. So it started with Goals 2000 in 1991, and then it morphed into No Child Left Behind in January of 2002. So precluding No Child Left Behind was the highly controversial Goals 2000 and the School to Work legislation passed in the 90s under President Clinton and initiated in the 80s under President Bush Sr. and continues the totalitarian agenda of the socialist system of school to workforce training. So, school to workforce training, they make it sound really good. They make it sound like, well, we're training the kids how to get a job after they leave school, after they leave college. Isn't that what you want, parents? Don't you want your child to be prepared to get a job? And of course we do. Of course we want vocational training. Of course we want our child's strengths to be worked on. And we want our kids to be prepared for competitive employment after high school and college. But the way they are doing it is what I'm going to go into today that many people who are against this whole regime and mentality of the government having a say-so, which I'll get into later, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So the No Child Left Behind is a 1,000-page giant education bill that dramatically extends the federal government's role in public education, and indeed is a breathtaking intrusion of the federal government on the state's control of education. The chairman of the Communist Party in USA 1932, William Foster, in his book Toward a Soviet Union America, called for a U.S. Department of Education the teaching of evolution, elimination of nationalism and religion in schools, the teaching of internationalism, globalism, and for the use of Pavlovian method, which is the direct instruction that you hear about today. All the teachers, you always hear direct instruction, direct. That's the teaching modalities and teaching strategies that's been used since No Child Left Behind was enacted. Okay, and I'll, as we move on, you'll understand more what that means. And so that is used on the students, which is AKA Mastery and the Benchmarks program and national testing instead of state requirements. So it took it out of the hands of states to say, this is how we're going to test our kids. We're going to do whatever tests they choose to do. Well, No Child Left Behind enacted that it's a national state testing, and which then gave the federal government more say-so over education in all states. And they rolled it out with this direct instruction modalities, which is also AKA mastery. So you'll also hear that if you hear teachers talk in IEP meetings. Well, your child didn't meet mastery. Your child didn't meet, well, we continue to teach that goal until they meet mastery. Okay, that's the Pavlovian theory method. And then the benchmark program. The benchmark program is a remedial program that they use that is implemented in all special education classes, and they also use it in general education. And the benchmark program, again, is this direct instruction of the mastery method that was enacted way back in with No Child Left Behind. So the Pavlovian method is a psychological method that uses a stimulus response, a dog animal training. It is the direct instruction method, which is mastery learning used to teach reading and math, as is how the workforce training is used for dumbed down third world skills. So this is being used in other third world countries, and where socialism exists, this is how they teach their kiddos. And now we're teaching it that way in America, and it's been here for many years. Following the psychological reinforcement method, teachers are forced to read from a script, use hand signals as dog training, clap their hands, and pop candies in students' mouths when they get the correct answer. So we started this reward system when they're good, years ago. President Bush mandated this method in his legislation that calls for retraining teachers to use scientific research-based teaching methods, a reward and punishment method, with students who conform receive rewards, and those who resist are ignored, isolated, and penalized. So that is the scientific research-based method. Now, let's talk about scientific research-based for a second. So whenever I'm advocating for kiddos to get services in IEPs, those services, or if it's a non-public agency service provider, everything has to be scientific research-based, approved by the state Department of Education. Now, if it's not research-based, approved by the Department of Education, then the school district isn't allowed to use that, whatever it may be. It may be a strategy, a teaching modality, a program, a service, whatever it is. It has to be approved and that it's research-based by the Department of Education. So I'll get into that a little bit more later, and because that is important, parents, that they use that to deny services and assistance for kids on IEPs, this research-based strategy that they use to deny services. So the next thing so we talked about No Child Left Behind, and now we're going to talk about, we talked about Goals 2000 in 1991, which precluded No Child Left Behind, which rolled out in 2002. And now we're going to talk about the Common Core, which rolled out in March of 2010. So the process of writing the Common Core standards began in 2009 and was imposed, which imposed more state standards. So again, standards-based, which is testing, focusing on college and career readiness, and exploring totalitarian education systems, pushing mastery learning and the direct instruction method. Our kids don't learn that way. Our kids don't learn through this mastery learning direct instruction method. They need sensory strategies. They need sensory modalities. They need a differentiated teaching approach that incorporates sensory integration. They need to learn by touching, by feeling, by seeing, by hearing, by moving their bodies, by working with their bodies. And really, all kids learn better that way. They don't learn by sitting at a desk, listening to a lecture, reading a chapter, and then writing an essay or taking a test. They don't learn that way, and most general ed kids don't learn very well that way either. And our kids cannot take tests. They are not good test takers. They fail the majority of the time, and then they label our kids because they failed tests. And so then they label them, and they have low expectations for them because our system is built on standardized test scores. In fact, Tatum speaks out against the use of standardized testing as a teaching model, and how using test scores to determine a student's potential is an outdated system. We need systemic change in special education, one that does not discriminate against kids who have neurological differences but are gifted in so many ways, says Channing. Channing has become one of the most well-known actors of our generation and has made a good life despite the odds against him. Tatum grew up with ADHD and dyslexia, struggling to pass his classes. Tatum was placed in special education classes with kids like himself and knew that is where he was stuck, or he would be in classes with regular kids. And he couldn't keep up in general education classes because of the standardized test scores. And they went too fast, and they didn't give him the accommodations he needed, and they didn't give more small group instruction. So he had to be in special ed classes his entire school life. And he knew that he was different. And what he said was, "It kills me that there are standardized tests geared towards just one kind of student." He told interviewers, the U.S. federal government has stated that their goal with Common Core was to make all students college and career ready. Sounds great in theory, but Peter Wood, the president of the National Association of Scholars, thinks that the Common Core program is actually resulting in colleges being flooded with students unprepared to do college-level work. Common Core pretended that it was going to be raising standards, but what it did, in fact, is put enormous pressure on colleges, many of which are now succumbing to that pressure to lower their standards. So colleges are even lowering their standards because kids are coming to them so low that they have to lower their standards for college students. In other words, the actual effect of Common Core is the further dumbing down of American children. So that was the Common Core. And now we're going to move on to the 1619 project, which again rolled out last August of 2020. It received worldwide attention when it was published last year and developed into a curriculum that now taught in more than 4,500 schools nationwide. It's probably more now. Many parents and historians believe the 1619 Project is a racial training program. So you make up your own mind what this is. I want you all to do your own research. Don't believe me. Listen to this information and then go research it on your own. 1619 advocates believe the history books are tainted by slavery and racism and seek to change America's birth year from 1776 to 1619 to mark the first enslaved Africans arriving in the United States. Historians have questioned the 1619 Project accuracy and have expressed their dismay about the factual errors in the curriculum, which teaches the overarching message that the American Revolution was launched in order to ensure slavery would continue. So historians, that's what they do, they study history, they are against it. And they express their dismay, saying that the purpose of it is to give kids the brainwashing to believe that the American Revolution was launched in order to ensure slavery would continue. So Nicole Hannah Jones, who is an American investigative journalist, she is a journalist, and she's the one who spearheaded the 1619 Project. Now, how is that? How does an American journalist change the entire curriculum of history across America? She is also known for her civil rights in the United States, her civil rights activism in the United States. She became a staff writer for the New York Times back in 2015. Okay, so she was awarded a Pulitzer Prize for her work on the project. Stated her primary reason for the 1619 Project was that colonists decided to declare their independence from Britain because they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. There you go. One student in middle school, Arteria Griggs, said that after being exposed to the 1619 Project, she felt that she had been misled about the realities of Black history in the United States. In middle school, they talked about slavery, and we were told Christopher Columbus, he found us. Griggs told the Sun-Times, "Now I read this, and I know he didn't. We were the founding fathers." So let me tell you about the curriculum of the 1619 Project, because I looked it up, and you can look it up online and look right at what that curriculum is. And they provide lesson plans to all teachers, and the lesson plans exploring the idea of America by Nicole Hannah Jones. The journalist, not an educator, wrote these lesson plans. It is put out by the Pulitzer Center of Education. A lesson plan for closed reading and guided discussion of Nicole Hannah Jones, her essays, which provides the intellectual framework and the introduction for the 1619 Project. Those are the lesson plans. And then all grades are given the index and flashcards for terms and historical events written by Nicole Hannah Jones. A partial listing of historical events and terms referenced in the 1619 Project essays, and Quizlets flashcards to support teachers and students with the curricular integration. And then the reading guides, which are quotes, key terms, and questions for the kiddos. This resource includes quotes, key terms, names, historical events, and guiding questions for each of over 30 essays and creative works that compose the 1619 Project, written by Nicole Hannah Jones. So that's the 1619 Project, parents. Okay, now we're going to move into sex education, which is our last point. But this is even more important and shocking, especially if parents, you weren't aware of this. This has been going on since 2016. But now, parents, it's different in different states. Okay, so in California, this is our full-on curriculum. So check your states to see what is your state offering for sex education in your school districts, okay? So the California Board of Education, along with Planned Parenthood and the ACLU, created and developed a progressive sex education and gender theory program. Students are shown sexually explicit content from kindergarten through 12th grade. It came through the AB 329, otherwise known as the California Healthy Youth Act. Doesn't that sound good, parents? The California Healthy Youth Act? Who wouldn't want that, right? It was created in 2016 and has several aimed purposes that teachers affirmatively recognize different sexual orientations and be inclusive of same-sex relationships in discussions, and teach about gender, gender expression, gender identity, and the harm of negative gender stereotypes. Lawmakers claim the bill aims to teach K-12 students how to ward off HIV and other STDs, to teach healthy attitudes towards sexual orientation, gender, and relationships, and to promote understanding of sexuality as a normal part of human development. Now, if it was done in a balanced way, where it's appropriate for the age, and some of this stuff is absolutely, we don't want to discriminate. We want to teach kids, how to understand things. But the way, if you look at the curriculum, you would be shocked on what the curriculum they are teaching. So the curriculum describes itself as California's best source for evidence-based instruction. There we go again, parents, evidence-based instruction. So this curriculum, and if you look it up, your jaw's gonna drop when you see what they're teaching the kids about sex, different positions, how to have sex, how to have different kinds of sex, how to have sex with the same sex, on and on and on. You'll see if you looked it up. Again, so this is evidence-based instruction approved by the CDE. In comprehensive sexual health education and teen pregnancy prevention. It also cites full compliance with California and national health education standards and the California Ed Code, including the California Healthy Youth Act. So all of those agencies completely put their stamp of approval on this sex education program. So again, evidence-based instruction. So let's talk about that. Sensory integration disorder, SID, which is almost most children who have ADHD, autism, any kind of neurological disorder, many of them have a sensory integration deficit because those neurological disorders overlap each other, and sensory integration typically is seen in many kids with neurological disorders. So at SID, sensory integration disorder, we have fought for 30 years since the Ayers, Gene Ayers, who discovered SID. We fought to get SID approved as a research-based instruction or research-based program to teach, to provide services through occupational therapists and to write goals. And it just got enacted over the past few years. I know one of the leading advocates, Dr. Suzanne Smith-Rowley. She's my go-to occupational therapist that I have all my IEEs done through. She writes protocols for the American Occupational Therapy Association, and she's fought for 30 years to have school districts accept SID as a research-based therapy. So, and sex therapy, or sex integration, sex education, research-based, right off the bat, boom, research-based. with all these associations putting their stamp of approval on it. So the California Sex and Gender Health Curriculum shows kids explicit images, normalizes kinky and perverse sexual activity, and teaches kids their basic identity as male or female is something fluid or changeable and is often being taught without parental permission. AB 329 allows the parent to opt their children out of sexual education, so know this. However, the bill prohibits parents from opting their children out of materials that discuss gender, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. So, if you do your diligence and you go down to the school district or your local schools and you say, I want to know, what is my child being taught in sex education? When are they being taught it? What time? What day? Because I'm opting my kid out and I don't want them being taught that. So you can opt them out of that lesson. But the AB 329 says you can't opt them out of them giving your kids this information, the handouts that discuss gender, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. You're not allowed to do that, parents. Did you know that? So the law prohibits abstinence-only education and prohibits any discussion of religious doctrine. So again, the AB 329 tells the districts, you can't just teach abstinence in sex education. You have to teach all these other things that I've just mentioned. And they also prohibit any discussion of religious doctrine in terms of viewing sex. Parents, especially religious parents, are portrayed as ignorant or untrustworthy when it comes to issues of sexual identity or activity, as if only the schools can be trusted to protect kids and teach them about sex. The ACLU teacher training adds that beginning in 7th grade, children must be taught all FDA-approved methods preventing pregnancy and transmission of HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, including condoms, contraceptives, and HIV treatment. Important, the ACLU instructs teachers on how to help students, regardless of their age, to obtain an abortion without parental knowledge or parental consent. So that is a biggie, a real shocker, and this has been going on since 2016, parents. So in California. So if you didn't know that, now you do. But I want to give you, here is a parent right that you can implement, and it is the California Education Code 51040. And it will give you that gives you the right to go to your school and say, I want to see the curriculum my child is being taught. Because I have many stories of parents going down to the school and saying, I want to see, and them telling the parents, no, we don't have to show you. We don't have to show you. But that's absolutely not true. They do have to show you the curriculum, parents. You are allowed to view the curriculum. And with that law that I just gave you, the California Ed Code 51040, I'll post it on my Advocates for Angels Facebook page as well. You have the right to view the curriculum. Okay. So, parents, if you want more information, please join my Special Education Parent Empowerment Network. It's a private Facebook page. Please fill out the questions because I can't approve you to be let in if you don't fill out those questions. And then I answer questions, and I can communicate with you on that private Facebook page. So please join there. And parents, if you are concerned about public school teaching your child progressive sex education and gender theory curriculum, or if you are a parent who has a problem with the rewriting of American history, please do your own research and on what your school is teaching your child. Because again, different states can be different. So do your research about your state, what your state is doing. But nevertheless, Common Core has been enacted across the nation because that was their whole goal, was to inflict government takeover and say so over education curriculum. So that now I know lots of states, some states fought Common Core. So check out all of these facts that I gave you today. And please like and share this video, because I would love for this video to just go viral so parents can get this information and know what's going on in schools today. It's not just virtual learning. Of course, that's, how much more of a problem can we possibly have than virtual learning? But, this stuff of what our kids are being taught, parents need to know about it. So, thank you, parents. I'm Valerie Abrahamian, the IEP Navigator, and I help coach and assist parents to get the special education program their child needs to thrive, both in school and in life after high school. And I look forward to seeing you next Monday at 10 o'clock for my next Advocates for Angels Facebook Live. Thanks. God bless everyone.